Hey everyone, this is Lisa from TRW. In this video, I'm going to give an explanation of the difference between grouping and make compound path. Now, figuring out the difference between the two functions can be a little bit tricky because sometimes they look exactly the same when you use them. So I'm going to talk about a couple of the differences between them, and then I'm going to give you an example where you can actually see that function put into action. So if you want to learn more about making compound path or grouping, just keep on watching. So here I am in Silhouette Studio. So I'm going to show you kind of like an easy example of the two, and then I'm going to bring in an actual design and show you more practically how the two functions work. So let me go ahead and move this icon out of here, and let's move these two shapes here. So one thing to note right off the bat is that these are two separate objects. We know that because each object has a little box around it. That's called the bounding box in designing. So you can see they're individual, and if I were to fill it in, so let's go ahead and click on this square, and let's fill this in, blue, and then see how that goes on top. So that means that's on top of my circle. So let's go ahead, right click, send it back, and you can see my little circles in here. I'm going to click on that, and then we're going to make this, lighter blue, just for that. So now we can tell these are two different options. They're sitting on top of each other. It's almost like in this example here, it's like you have a fancy placemat and that's a plate on top of it. So when you have something grouped together, I can take these and I can go ahead, select both of them, right click, and group. What this does is it means that they are going to move together as a group, and I can resize it as a group. Now, with me, I'm married. So my husband and I, we are together married, but we are still individual people, okay? So we have our own likes, our own dislikes. It's kind of like this. Like both those objects are individual objects. They can be different colors. They can be cut separately. They don't share properties except for the fact that they're bonded together. Now let me go ahead and right click and ungroup, and so you can see now they're ungrouped. I can move it, I can kind of get that out of there, and I'm just going to hit Control-Z. So what a compound path does is it tells the software, hey, all of these lines work together to make one big shape. So it almost flattens your design. So right here, when we go and make this a compound path, when we get to this line here, the software is like, okay, I'm going to fill this in because this is a shape. And then when it gets to this line here, it's like, okay, this is the end of the shape. Or in this case, it's like a hole. So let me go ahead and make this a compound path and show you what I'm talking about. So let's go ahead, right click, make compound path. And now you can see the lines are the same, but now it's kind of flattened into one shape. Now sometimes it still gets a little bit harder to work through, so let me go over here and open up this design here. Now this is just a little like peeking giraffe we have in our animal peek pack here at TRW, and you can see we have our colors on top. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to go ahead, right click, ungroup. So now you can see I have multiple objects in here, okay? So I have my little yellow for the giraffe. We have these brown parts, and we're kind of all set there. So this design is kind of made for you to put on top of this black part here. So we can clearly see all the colors in here. It makes the shape. If we were to move it around, it would be grouped together, and it works together to make one look. Now if I were to take all of this, we're going to keep all of the same lines in there, but basically we're going to say, okay, use all these lines to just make one shape, so one color. So I'm going to right click, make compound path, and check it out. We can still see the same shape, but it's almost like it's been turned into like a coloring book page. It took all those lines and converted it over to one object using that. So with making a compound path, I always like using that as much as I can. So after I type out a word, when I'm done, I make it a compound path. One thing to note about Silhouette Studio is that when you're doing changes and modifications, it's very picky about how many objects are in your workspace. So the more objects you have, the slower it runs. So what I do is I convert as many things to a compound path as possible. That way I have the least amount of items in my workspace so I can work quickly. So that is a quick overview of grouping and compound path. Understanding the difference between the two may take some time, it may take some practice, but once you can master the difference, it does help with your designing, it helps speed up your process, and just makes you a more efficient person in Silhouette Studio. So if you like this video, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to us on YouTube. Let us know what you think. Leave us a comment below and let us know what else you'd like to see.